Begin our Meaningful Jewish Living Passover workshop. I'd like to thank you all for joining, and I also want to clarify a couple of things before we begin. Thank you for putting in the source sheet into the chat. If you would like to open up the source sheet, it will be great. If you'd like to get a pen and paper, it will be wonderful as well. This is not going to be a Q&A about all your related Passover questions, about how to observe Passover, the koshering of your home, all the elements. That's going to come at 8 o'clock together with my wonderful colleagues, Rabbi Leniado and Rabbi Steinmetz. So come back and join. It's a separate link. It's on cgha.org/VDS. There were all your questions we'll go through, as well as the special setup given that Seder starts this year on Saturday evening, and we have to prepare for Shabbat and Seder. We're going to go through some questions there. So write them down and look forward to answering them. Tonight we're going to spend the next 45 minutes to 50 minutes going through how we get ready for the Seder. And the Seder, but also how we get ready for Passover. And I want to frame this with two openings and two opening thoughts. Firstly, let us remember, and importantly remember, that coronavirus, as much as it's happening around us and we're still in the middle of it, and yes, we're seeing a glimmer of sunlight all different ways around us, but coronavirus did not cancel the Festival of Freedom. It's a time when we're called on, just like we were last year, to think outside of the matzah box, to think differently, to think creatively, to think about how I can experience Passover this year, even if it's not how I really want it to be, even if it's not the way that it's meant to be, even if it's not how it was for me last year, the year before last year. Of course, we're thrown into this, but think outside of the matzah box. Think a little bit differently about how we can make sure that despite all that's happening around us, despite that we're still in the middle of this pandemic, that we can experience, enjoy, and gain from this Pesach experience. That's opening statement number one. Second statement, that there's a disagreement and a question posed by the great sage, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. He was born in 1740, he died in 1810, and he was known for his deep insights and also his very quick quips. He was one of the most important Hasidic masters that we have, and his teachings are sourced in so many different writings throughout the generations. And he argued that we've adopted the wrong greeting for Passover. And let me ask everyone to use the chat or or open their microphones. What do you wish people before Passover? What is a traditional greeting? What do you wish someone before Pesach?
Aziz and Pesach.
Hag Sameach.
Aziz and Pesach.
You wish them a
Hag Sameach.
Happy Passover. Aziz and Pesach.
happy Pesach. A what?
Kosher Pesach.
Kosher and Pesach. Excellent. And what do you wish people before Purim?
Hag Purim Sameach.
Hag Purim Sameach is one for sure. What else?
Happy Purim.
Purim. The traditional Yiddish greeting that we've adopted in our lexicon is a joyous Purim. And he suggested a difference. He suggested that on Purim, we shouldn't say a joyous Purim, and on Pesach, we shouldn't say a kosher Pesach, but we should flip them. And why is that? He said it should be just the opposite. He said on Purim, we should be reminded that it should be kosher, that we shouldn't go overboard. We shouldn't think about the craziness and the distractions and the festivities and the externalities that we get so focused on, that we should stay on the right path and have a kosher Purim. But because of all the preparations that we have to do for Pesach, we might lose sight of the fact that it's meant to be joyous experience. And we might lose sight of the fact that it's meant to be simcha, happiness. It's meant to be joy. And we shouldn't focus only on observing the strictures and the laws. We know about them, but we should find meaning in the joy of the festival. And that's why maybe we should not say a kosher Pesach. We should say a freilichen Pesach, a happy Pesach. And I want to remind everybody and let everybody know, if this is your first Pesach your second Pesach, your third, or even your fifth or sixth, or if you're in double digits like me, you should find meaning, you should find relevance, and we're going to do that by preparing. Nothing can be achieved if we don't prepare.
But on the other hand, Weiss thinks that
Okay, so let's look at the first opening story. One of my most favorite stories from Rabbi Aryeh Levine. Rabbi Aryeh Levine was known as the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, the great sage of Jerusalem. He was a founding of the country, of the state, of the modern state of Israel, and he was known for all the chesed he did and the care and the love that he had for every single Jew. And he was known for his compassion. And this story comes back from many years ago in the late 1940s on Chol HaMoed Pesach. He was visiting the prisoners. The British mandate had imprisoned a lot of Jews in Israel, in Palestine, and he would go all the ways before Shabbat to visit them in prison, to check how they were doing. And if you look at the top of the page top of the page number 1, the source sheet is in the chat. Beautiful story. What would he do? He said everything was fine. And how was your Pesach? He asked everybody. How was your Seder? Could you fulfill the obligations for the Seder? He said everything was fine. We're able to fulfill halachic requirements. Could you pour out your anger on the nations that don't want to know you? And they answer. And he returned with a smile. And he says, no, you're mistaken beautifully. You do have the key to freedom. It's the key to your heart, which can give you spiritual freedom. And he continued, we're prisoners in our own bodies, but we can be freed of the bondage of our materialistic desires. By opening our hearts and allow ourselves to gain control, we can become truly free. The experience that we're meant to have on Pesach is to experience a transformation of that which holds us back, to reimagine and to re-experience the magnitude of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt. Beautiful story by Rav Aryeh. So let's have a look, just to go backwards a little bit to recap. How did we understand Pesach? Pesach celebrates what element, guys? What's the major, if you had to sum up, what are we celebrating at the Seder and the whole festival of Passover? Put into the chat, unmute your mic. What is the reason we're having this holiday?
Freedom.
Freedom. Freedom is the recognition. We're celebrating what element, what act, what experience?
The exodus from Egypt.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Amanda. And everybody else who said it silently. I can see some people mouthing off the words. If we can only understand what we're celebrating, if we understand why we're celebrating, why we were in Egypt in the first place, how we got to Egypt in the first place. So as much as we need to understand all about Pesach, we need to go backwards. How did we get into Egypt? Why were we there? Why were we slaves? And before we can understand how we need to celebrate, we need to understand how we got there. And that's the bottom of page number 1. This is just a summary you can read on your own time, but it's important to keep this in mind, to understand how we got there. And yes, it's involving the plagues and a famine and exile, things you need to understand the background. Okay, what are the reasons for slavery? Now we know why we got there, but why did God have to enslave the Jewish people? God proved through the miracles and many other experiences that there's so much in his power, albeit everything is in his power. Why did God have to give us the experience of slavery? And we see here source from Genesis, from Bereshit, and the Gemara, that there was an experience that we were meant to have through the slavery experience. Genesis chapter 15, verse 7 and 8. Why do we go into this experience? So I know I'll inherit it. What does that mean? Why was Avram punished by having descendants enslaved for 210 years? Says the Talmud in the Tractate of Nedarim. Shmuel answered, because Avram doubted God's credibility. The whole reason, according to this Talmud, that we, generations later, were enslaved for 210 years is because of a lack of faith of our founding father, of Avraham. Everyone with me? Everyone understand? Can you just own that for a moment? the reason that we are experiencing 210 years of back-breaking labor, of horrible conditions, is because Avraham doubted God. The Maharal, the famous Rabbi Judah of Low of Prague, the next source, God placed Avraham's descendants in exile because he was lacking in his belief and his trust in him. And God therefore placed his descendants in exile so they would correct the mistake and fully trust in him. They would see the power of God's deeds for those whom he loves, as well as the awesome power he showed to the Egyptians through the plagues. The Maharal explains, yes, Avraham, the first Jew, lacked an element of complete faith. The first Jew didn't have complete faith in God, and therefore his descendants are going into slavery. And the Tzfat Emet, the famous Hasidic rabbi of Ger, the first Hasidic rabbi of Ger, beautifully, mystically shares many of his deep writings on the Torah portions as well as the festivals, and commenting on this idea in the Torah portion of Parshat Va'era in the book of Exodus. He says the purpose of the Exodus from Egypt was that we should know that God brought us out from there. From when a person forgets this and grows proud, says, my strength, kochi ve'otzem yadi, it's my doing, my ability, I'm good, must be brought into a state of helplessness to show him everything's from God. So let's capture these two ideas. There's an element of humility and a lack of faith that Avraham had. And Jerry's asking, where was the lack of faith? So the lack of faith is the interpretation of the Gemara of this pasuk here, chapter 15, that I'll send you the Gemara afterwards, that it's interpretation of the experience that Avraham had. And if you look at the next bottom of page 2, it's a very big punishment. And it's a question that we could really grapple with. But there's a reason why it's so fundamentally important. That of all of the people to have complete faith, why Avraham needs to be complete rock faith with no cracks in his foundation. Rav Dessler beautifully writes, bottom of page number 2, about the difference between the physical and the spiritual slavery. He says that everything that happens externally has an internal expression and meaning as well. And he writes that the exile in Egypt, everyone has the source sheet, click the link in the chat, open up the chat for yourself, and the source sheet for yourself, and he explains that the exile in Egypt appears to a normal person as if it was physical slavery. We were living through a slavery. It was a real slavery. Don't imagine for a moment, and nor am I suggesting that it was not a physical slavery. But he's saying something deeper than. He's saying a spiritually oriented person sees that there's something happening externally that's meant to trigger an internal feeling as well. That the physical experience is meant to conjure a experience internally. And in short, he says, we're slaves to the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara. And the Torah calls Egypt Mitzrayim, from the root of the word Meitzar, which means constriction and distress, and also means boundary, that we were stuck individuals in a certain place. We were confined by our thinking. We weren't able to see more than we could experience to ourselves right then. And the root, he says, of para in Hebrew is also significant. To lay open or untie, implying that the goal of the Egyptian impurity was to not break us physically, but ultimately break us spiritually. So we're building a case here for why slavery happened and what slavery was, not just a physical manifestation, but deeper than a spiritual manifestation of why this becomes such a relevant annual experience for each and every one of us every single year to reimagine, relive, and to gain from this process, and ultimately to give a little bit of the end goal away, why Pesach starts the journey and the climb towards Chag HaShavuot, to receiving of the Torah in just 7 weeks. Rabbi Avigdor Miller, one of the great founding rabbis in America in the 60s and 70s, profound individual, deep writings available in English, speaks a little about how this was shaping us as a nation. And he writes that the plagues, everyone with me, bottom of page 3, and he explains that the plagues were 10 tests of Israel. And we know from the Genesis, the 10 tests of Avraham. And here he speaks about the 10 tests of the nation of Israel, would properly learn the lessons of the plagues. All the plagues had common lessons. Yes, they all manifest themselves differently, but they all thematically connect to the individual purpose of each plague. Among the general lessons of the plagues were the following: to know God and to gain more awareness of God, to demonstrate that Israel were God's chosen people, set apart from Egypt and all the nations, to demonstrate the emptiness of the worship of false gods. There are reasons for these plagues. There's an individual reason to each of them. Yes, they're thematically connected. We need to understand what they are, and they're part of the founding elements of how we became a nation. Rabbi Akiva Katz, living in between England and South Africa as a medical doctor, writes profoundly, speaks profoundly. I encourage everybody to read his writings. His essays are available online. In a wonderful book, Living Inspired, that I remember buying in the year 1999, still have it, with some highlighting and notes in it from when I first read it. I bought it in Jerusalem. And sometimes you buy books and you remember distinctly where you get them. And this is from a book, so it doesn't exist anymore, but it's a prized possession of mine. And he writes, bottom of page 3, that Tzfat Emet expresses the connection between the miracles that commemorated in the Seder and the rest of Jewish history in the most beautiful manner. He asks why we call the procedures of the Seder night a Seder. The word Seder means order, a regular, predictable series of events. Nothing about the experience was in order. Strange that we celebrate the most potent series of miracles, the sharpest departure from the natural order, with the name order. Nothing about how this happened was in order. So why do we call the evening a Seder? And he says, his answer is unforgettable. And he's quoting here the Tzfat Emet. He says, for the Jewish people, a natural order is the miraculous. To understand what it means to live Jewishly is to know that our existence is a miracle. We have a Seder of miracles, profound, beautiful. Everything about our history is a miracle. We were forged in impossible circumstances, conceived in a blaze of miracles, born beyond time. We can never descend into the natural. For us to do would be so souring of the worst kind, a transforming mitzvah to chametz, lethal in the extreme. He's writing here so beautifully that the reason we have a Seder is because we celebrate the miraculous, because that's the founding aspect of what it means and to live Jewishly. Continuing on to page 4, I want to turn for a moment to the Seder experience itself. Because while Passover exists for a number of days, and there's so much we have to take into account about what the holiday means, the major aspect of Passover is definitely the Seder. How many Seders are we having? 2. Thank you, Bob. I'm assuming that meant 2. We have 2 Seders. And a lot of people are challenged by the reality that there are 2 Seders. People feel it's an unfair experience to go and do the same thing over and over again. And especially in this year where some of us might be with less people that we're normally going to be with. We would have guests on one night, guests on the other night, might be the same people, and might be alone for this year as well. So how can I have this Seder experience twice? So there's lots to say about this and lots being written, certainly last year and this year and throughout the generations. But the reality is that the experience of the Seder, if we truly understand what it's meant to do for us and to us, then we should be inspired to do it over again. And yes, some people say the first night is a dress rehearsal for the second night, but there's so many meanings and experiences that we can gain from the Seder that we can do everything the first night and everything the second night and have an ultimately enriching and different experience on both times. So what is the Seder experience? And what is the crux of the Seder experience? So top of page number 4, we see the passage from the book of Exodus. Very clearly translated and very clearly mandated is what experience? What are we meant to do? It's written right there. The mandate of the Seder is to do what?
Tell your children what had happened, basically to relate the story.
Relate the story, right. So tell your children is the literal text of the book of Exodus, but we can expand that to be understand what happened. Understand, relive, and re-experience what happened. And Maimonides codifies the experience a level deeper. It's a positive commandment to relate the miracles and the wonders wrought for our ancestors in Egypt on the night of the 15th of Nisan. Remember, on this day you left Egypt. We need to not just tell a story, it's a positive commandment to understand what happened to our ancestors on that night. Remember again, the reason we had slavery, we said at the start, was because Abraham didn't have complete faith. Why do you think that was important? Why did the Gemara, the Talmud, suggest that Abraham had a crack in his faith and therefore we were enslaved? Putting that question out there. The bottom of page number 4, the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch takes the Torah portions, takes the 5 books of Moses, and extracts through each portion the mitzvot as they appear in the Torah. How many mitzvot in the Torah?
613.
Thank you. So the Sefer HaChinuch writes at the top of each Torah portion, there are X amount of positive commandments, X amount of negative commandments, and it goes through them. So it's a wonderful way to study the weekly Torah portions, not in thematic story form, which a lot of people appreciate and there's a lot to learn from, but also what are the mitzvot each week, and what are the commandments, and what are the do's and the don'ts. So the bottom of page number 4, the Sefer HaChinuch, mitzvah number 21, says, don't be surprised how many mitzvot there are relating to the Exodus from Egypt. Yes, we have the Seder, but we have so much more that is daily, that is part of our experience of reliving this story, both positive and negative commandments, for the foundation and pillar upon which our Torah and our faith stand. This is why we always state when making blessings and praying in commemoration of the Exodus of Egypt, there's the absolute proof of the creation of the world, and there is an omnipotent master of this world who created everything, who ran the creation. Everything we say relates back to the Exodus from Egypt. And daily, in prayers, morning, evening, we relate to the Exodus from Egypt. The mezuzahs on our doorposts, in our homes, relate to the Exodus from Egypt. The whole festival of Passover relates to the Exodus from Egypt. Why is that so important? Why did we get into Egypt in the first place? Because Abraham had a crack in his faith. Why is that important? What is that teaching us? What is that expressing for us? Anybody want to share a thought? There are never any wrong answers.
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect. But why pick on Abraham?
Because he was the keystone of the Jewish religion, and the keystone has to be perfect and strong in order to build on top of it. And if you question or ask an inappropriate question, there are consequences.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I think together with Michael, that's exactly the point that we're trying to make here. That if we build a foundation on a level of something that is not complete, absolute, then everything that comes after that is not going to be complete and absolute, and not going to be rock solid. And the founding father of Judaism had to have complete faith. So there's an element of why what Robert said is absolutely accurate, and perhaps something to keep in mind about why we got into Egypt and how we're meant to experience what we are meant to gain each and every Passover. Because that's where we're going to turn the corner in a moment to understand what it is that we're meant to extract from this experience each and every year. We are on page number 5. And we're looking at the beautiful source in Rabbi Yosef Yashar, who writes in a book, in a sefer called the Levush Yosef. Please feel free to continue to ask questions in the chat, either directly or to everybody, and I will monitor them. Find it challenging to answer the questions that come in via text and WhatsApp and email. So I'm just looking at during the class. You'd be surprised, guys. Some people do that. I like to keep the chat questions in the chat box. But source number 4, page number 5, Rabbi Yashar writes as follows: on Saturday night, a person is given the opportunity to instill in his children the fundamentals of faith and the mitzvah performance. And whoever tells the Exodus from Egypt in length is praiseworthy. We get praised. The principal element of the mitzvah of recounting the Exodus from Egypt is to tell the great night, the miracle salvation that he did for us. And the main intention of recounting is to implant within the hearts of the members of the families belief in God and the greatness of his might. The whole experience is to inject faith into us every single year. We have so many ways and reasons that our faith goes up and down all the times. Things happen to us individually, things happen around us, for us, to us. Here we have a whole reason of a whole Seder experience that is meant to be a reminder and an injection and a charge of faith for us, and to impart that onto the next generation. That's the Seder 101 in a way that maybe you've never seen it before. So now we know the faith that we're meant to gain. What do we actually do with the Seder? How do we actually fulfill that? How do we experience that? So we have the set of the Seder, which is the 15 steps of the Seder. If you look at page number 6, there are a few things that we need to do to have this experience for us. What are the required things?
The Seder plate.
What else?
Shmura matzah?
Why shmura matzah?
I don't know.
Okay, good, but we need some sort of matzah.
You
Yeah.
need the stuff that goes on the Seder plate.
The stuff-
Karpas, the
Okay.
karpas, the maror, the charoses, zroa, all those things you need.
Okay, so we need a Seder plate. Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay. We need matzah. What else do you need?
Wine,
Wine or,
churches.
okay. What else?
Oh, I think you need to have to be with family and other Jews around you in order for all these things to come to life and to retell the story through those, I'll call them props.
Okay, so that's an excellent point, and we can unpack that for a moment, Dave. You actually don't need anyone around you.
What happened to no wrong answers?
There's no wrong answer. I'm just there to reorient your answer. The Seder experience is so designed to be engaging with those around you, should there be anyone around you, but it's equally powerful, and it's something you need to do if you're alone as well. And the format of the experience and the questions are also there to help you, whether you're alone or whether you're with people. And the question and answer format is there as much as being alone, as much as being with anyone around you. So we'll go through that in a moment. We need the Seder plate, we need wine, we need cups, we need matzah, and you need a meal, and you need a Haggadah. And I want to make sure you understand what it means to have an Haggadah. That's the Seder book. There are many different forms of Haggadah out there. Outside of the Bible, there's probably more Haggadah published than any other Jewish book. Beautiful commentaries, beautiful pictures, beautiful instructions, quotes, inspirational themes. And if you haven't had a chance to go out and buy one, go and do so. And if you're in the neighborhood, of course, go to Judaica Classics, our neighborhood Judaica store, to get a Haggadah. But you also need a meal, because part of the step of the Seder experience is to have a meal. To have a meal and to experience the meal. And that's not just because we like to eat as Jews. That's true. But you have a meal because it's part and parcel of the experience. You also need salt water. You also need pillows. And you need a cup for Elijah. How many mitzvot are there on Passover night? So we just went through some of them. There are 7 different commandments on Passover night, and we'll go through the difference of what they are, because it's important to know where they come from and where they are separated by. 2 mitzvot are from the Torah, and the rest are rabbinical. Anyone want to take a punt at guessing? And to underscore what Dave said, there's no wrong answer.
The Torah is the Kiddush, right, to sanctify the day, holiday. That would be one. And eating, reliving the experience, I guess.
You're guessing.
All right, eating them and then making the yachatz and the matzah.
So anybody who was paying attention from the first part, we said in the book of Exodus, what's the one mitzvah from the Torah?
To retell your children.
Thank you.
about-
To retell
Yeah.
the story, to relive the experience of Higarat Labincha, that's one major commandment. Although the Torah establishes this commandment between parents and children, that's the text, it is not limited to parents. If you don't have children, it's still a mitzvah, a commandment on you. If you don't have people around you, you still need to retell the story for yourself. So that's the first biblical commandment. The second biblical commandment is to eat the matzah. Be'erev tachlu matzot. That in the evening you shall eat the matzah. And to fulfill this, you need to have, we say 2/3 of one of those square machine matzot. When we get up to the piece of eating the matzah, you can have matzah afterwards. You can have matzah as part of your meal. If you enjoy, you can have matzah inside of your chicken soup as well. But you need to eat matzah. Then there are the rest of the commandments are rabbinical. What are the other commandments of Pesach? These are fundamental, so write them down. Eating maror, eating bitter herbs. Preferably people eat what? What do people use for maror? They eat romaine lettuce. Many have the custom now of eating grated horseradish as well. You should eat about 8 to 10 inches of lettuce. You have to, of course, make sure the lettuce is cleaned or horseradish root. Another mitzvah. There are 5 rabbinical commandments. We need to know what they are. Pesach is coming up, guys. Eating maror, eating the afikoman, the last thing you eat of the night, the taste in your mouth, before or after you have dessert. If you're following the 15 steps, it's the last step of eating. So you have your macaroons, and I happen not to like all the new crazy macaroon flavors out there. I'm a classic macaroon guy, so just give me chocolate and vanilla. Last year, Rachel found some like confetti macaroons and pistachio macaroons. Like, what's happening? It's just America, you're out of control. That's just classic macaroons. Sorry, afikoman and maror, saying hallel, expressing verses of praise, part of the Seder. We'll get there in a second. Drinking the 4 cups of wine derivative, grape juice or wine. That's another commandment according to the rabbis. Demonstrating acts of freedom is the last one. How do we demonstrate acts of freedom? What do we physically do? So 2 common ways. We recline when we drink. Make sure you recline to the right side, which is not the right side, might be the left side. And we also lean on pillows. There's a custom to have pillows and comfortable chairs. We'll talk about decorating the table in a moment. And we recline. And even the poor person reclines. Even the one that doesn't have a lavish table, doesn't have a big, beautiful meal ahead of them. Everybody has to go ahead and experience these 5. So to recap.
And isn't it also that you have that you can't pour your own wine? Somebody else has.
So that is a custom. It's an expression of royalty. In days of old, you wouldn't pour your own grape juice or wine or your own beverage. You would have a waiter or someone else pour your drink for you. So a lot of the expressions at the Seder and the customs are there to express the royalty. It's not a mitzvah. It's one of these ways we express freedom. There are 5 rabbinical commandments, 2 biblical commandments. And I want to take a punt at all of them in reverse order, leaving out the desire for my macaroons. Eating the maror, eating afikoman, saying hallel, drinking 4 cups of wine, demonstrating acts of freedom. 5 rabbinical, and the 2 biblical are retelling the story, reliving the experience. If there are children there, making sure they know what's happening and why this is a fundamental evening to build, to recharge our faith as Jews. That's what we said at the very beginning. And to eat the matzah. Let's get to the Seder plate on page number 6. There are different versions of the Seder plate. Of course, we're Jews. We differ in our custom depending on where we come from. So there's Sephardic orientations, there's Ashkenazic orientations. If you are from Eastern Europe, we're going to go off the classic Ashkenazi Seder plate. The Seder plate does not have to be beautiful and ornate and expensive. It can be plastic and $2.99 from Amazon, or it can be something decorative and something in your family, something that your children make. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it has to have these elements on them, and you need to buy them, but you also need to prepare them. So separate to the Seder plate, you need 3 matzot. 2 of them are for the Lechem Mishnah, the same as you have on any Sabbath, Shabbat meal, or Yom Tov, or holiday meal. And the 3rd matzah is the one which is going to be broken as part of the Afikoman. All of this, we're going to go into great detail during the model Seder, which is next week. We're just doing an overview of the requirements for the Seder and the experience. What else goes onto the Seder plate? The charoset. The charoset is a mixture of fruits that are all listed in the canon, in the Tanakh, and the mixture symbolizes the Jewish people, because we have all different flavors and tastes, and apples, almonds, walnuts, figs, all of them mixed together with a little bit of wine or grape juice. And it should be thick, not watery, and it ultimately resembles and symbolizes the mortar, the cement that the Jews were used when they made the bricks in Egypt. The karpas, a vegetable. The vegetable has to be a derivative that's something that grows on the ground, so it has the blessing as one of the steps of the Seder of karpas is the 3rd step, borei pri ha'adama. Why karpas? Karpas is there to engage the children, to ask, why are we taking something, dipping in salt water? The 3rd step, if you look on page 6, the 3rd step is there as a prompt to engage the children. And the children is not young people, the children is anybody participating in the Seder. So I want to underscore that the whole design of this experience, the 15 steps of this experiential evening, is to make us curious. What is the most important location today in Judaism? Is it the synagogue or is it the home? Which one?
Home.
Home. There are more rituals, ceremonies, and experiences happen in our home than in synagogue. Certainly, synagogue is elevated, is spiritual, and we go there for communal prayer, for gathering, and please God, we'll be able to come back safely in the way that we enjoy and need to before Corona. But the most powerful place that we have is our home. And the Seder experience brings that to life in such a beautiful experiential way by these 15 steps of the Seder. By going through, experiencing this every single year to build an appreciation and to experience a recharge of faith for us. Come back to the Seder plate, we have Zerawa, the shank bone, recalls the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, and we have the egg, which has multiple meanings. Let's rest on the idea of mourning, recognizing the loss of the temple of the Beit HaMikdash and not yet having that in our day. Turning to page number 7. This is an outline of the Seder experience. We're going to go into more depth on Monday night when we go through the model Seder. But if you're not able to join Monday night, here's an outline, goes through the steps, helps you understand exactly what it's for. I want to focus on page 8 for a moment, because this question comes up a lot. And we touched on this earlier, is how do I make this experience meaningful to me? And how do I get through the experience without being burdened by the experience? And it's late, and it's long, and I'm tired, and I'm hungry, and there's so many different feelings and emotions happening. So nothing in life happens without preparation. And that is ultimately so true for the Pesach experience as well. You need to prepare your homes. We have a commandment to get rid of chametz, to get rid of leavened products and leavened goods, and we need to sell them. We can't own them, so it's a prohibition. We need to remove the remnant of them and the visual ability for us to see them. So there's a lot of work we're doing to prepare our homes. We'll talk about that at 8 o'clock. And it's also going to be a long night, so you've got to prepare. You don't need to go overboard with the cleaning. This is not an excuse for spring cleaning. And if you do so, that is a misappropriation of your OCD to clean your house and saying that it's for Passover. That, I've got to move the beds and move this and move that. You might need to do that if you need to do that for yourself. Don't do that and break your back and cause your roommate or your spouse or your partner to go crazy and use it under the guise of Passover cleaning. That's not fair. Passover cleaning happens in your kitchen, happens where the food is. Haven't been into all your homes. If you have food in other areas, make sure you can't see the food. But we do not need to get on our hands and knees and be scrubbing every part of our home with a toothbrush and a toothpick and say it's Passover cleaning. If you need to do that, go for it, be my guest and enjoy it. But don't say it's for Passover. Nullify the crumbs, get rid of them, remove them, sell them. Talk about how in a moment at 8 o'clock, go through the Seder. Make sure you understand how the Seder is going to happen and how you can experience it. If you're running the Seder, you need to prepare. If you're a guest at the Seder, you need to prepare. It doesn't matter. Preparation is key. There's so many tools out there. Email me, happy to suggest a particular Haggadah for you that you might like. You can still buy it. Everyone has Amazon Prime. You can get it in time and you can prepare for the experience. You can make it meaningful. There are props, there are games. There's so many materials out there, but don't just arrive at the Seder with a bottle of wine and for your host, if you're going somewhere, or with your spouse, and expect to gain from the experience. Questions, preparation are key. You can move things around as well. The Chad Gadya, beautiful experience. It often gets pointed at the very end and we miss over it. Understand the mystical meaning of the Chad Gadya. The animal noises, they're so much fun. Certainly in the Kraus household, don't leave it till the kids are falling off their face. Bring it forward. Make it pivot around a little bit. You can't move certain things around, but you can move around the 15 steps a little bit for sure. Understand why it's there and make sure you can relate the experiences in a language and in a vernacular that speaks to the people at your Seder. So if you're with teens, young kids, with people older, speak in a way that's going to be meaningful for them and understand the power of the evening. It's something that people unfortunately miss every single year because we get taken and we get struck by the ability to not see past the experience. And it's so fundamental. I want to share 5 major takeaways that I think we should all experience this Passover. And if you have a writing instrument or note, you could write them down. I think if we can each imagine and understand these 5, then in many ways we will have captured what it means to have a meaningful Pesach Seder experience. I want to make sure that we also understand the Passover extends beyond just the Seder. The Seder is, of course, one important element, but there's more to Passover than the Seder. And there's a whole festival, and there's Chol HaMoed, the middle, the intermediary days, and there's the second days, which are also like the first days. And we'll go through all of that at 8 o'clock with Rabbi Zlaniada and Rabbi Steinmetz to join on. Of course, it's a separate Zoom. Why? Because we want to make sure that you stay awake. You don't just stay on this Zoom. So we'll sign off a few minutes early, and then we'll go to that. What are the 5 most important things about Passover? And I think that our greatest contributions to Passover, and ultimately our greatest contributions to the world, are summarized in the following 5 words. And we need to, before we say and think about and unpack what they are, we need to think about the context of who we are in the world and how the Jews have remained, have survived, and have thrived, and profoundly influenced nearly every aspect of every field and every aspect of this globe is ultimately remarkable and miraculous. And I said that earlier. I said that to be Jewish is ultimately to live and to breathe a miracle every single day. And Jews are a minority. And we've been the recipients of more Nobel Prizes than any other nation or people in the world. What is it? And I think it goes back to the beginning of the birth of our people. And I think there's 5 major themes that Passover conveys. And they're mantras depends where you're from. They're mantras that lead us to have successful and meaningful lives. And I think, as I said a moment ago, that the 5 most important things of Passover. What are they? Responsibility, family, faith, optimism, and memory. And I think if we understand what these things are, how they're contributions to the world, and how they make Passover a meaningful experience, then we've captured the macro theme of Passover. So why do we call it a seder? Anybody?
It means order. It
It means
means
order.
order.
Thank you, Marcelline. It means order. And we said earlier that the experience doesn't follow an order. But when God took us out of Egypt, we discovered that God didn't exhaust his connection with the world by creating it. God didn't create the world in the story of Genesis, sit back on a rocking chair and a beer and just relax. No, God is involved in every single thing that happens. He has an ongoing, caring relationship with all of us. God took us out of the land of Egypt. So whatever happens to us in today's time, 2021, is not a coincidence. It's God's will. And we need to think about, were there times in our lives where we saw God, where we experienced God, and it wasn't just a coincidence. The theme of family. We said a moment ago, more Jewish things happen at home than happen in a synagogue, because the importance, according to the Torah, is the focus on family, not the house of God. The family is key. The home is key to recreate that experience, to understand why it's so important, the centrality of our home, and what we're doing to make sure that Judaism and our home are intertwined, not just once a year, but every single day. What are we doing to make sure that we recreate the centrality of Jewish life in our homes on Passover, but extend beyond that as well? Children. And the theme of children, why they're so important. How do we reach them? How do we connect to them? Interwoven into the 15 steps are embracing everybody, no matter what they think, where they're at, the wicked, the wise, the one who can't talk, the intelligent, the one who doesn't know how to ask questions. And the commentators find all these profound ideas in all the juxtaposition of all these children that appear at the Seder, because no one is cast off and no one is excluded from the Passover table. We never forget anybody. We never ignore anybody. Pause and reflect for us as parents, as siblings, as children, as nieces and nephews, as uncles and aunts. We're all one of those things. It might not be all of everything, but all of us is one of those things. How are we building ties with our family members? How are we mending relationships that need to be worked on? How can we reach and teach the people that might not know the beauty of this religion and all that it has to offer? And how are we making sure that we are continuing that which is so important to us with the people around us, the people that mean something to us? Focus for a moment on the Paschal lamb, because doesn't get a lot of mention. It's a little shank bone that we rescued from the cat's bowl or the chicken's bowl, and we put onto the Seder plate. No, you can't do that. That's not something you should do. But the theme of the Paschal lamb has a difficult place for us, because we don't connect with the temple. We didn't experience a temple. It wasn't something that we could connect with. So that the theme of the Paschal lamb can also be challenging. And the idea of the name of Passover, that God passed over the homes and spared their inhabitants, is a major part of the name, of course. But it's all about idols, and it's about ancient paganism, and it's about things that we worship. And it's exactly the antithesis of what Judaism is. And it's a focus, on understanding that our challenge as Jews is to replicate the heroism of the people in the story and to put it into a contemporary format. That the miracles of the Passover experience at the Exodus allowed us to become God's chosen people. And they had to slaughter the lamb that was an Egyptian god, the most important animal, and they did that with faith and with excitement. And we think about their relevance for today, and we ask, so what are the powerful idols that we have? And what are the challenges that we have that block us from going forth, from separating from those idols in and experiencing more blessing from God? And they're the themes, they're the takeaways, and they're the thematic ways that we can connect with the Passover experience in 2021. And I said at the very beginning that coronavirus didn't cancel the Seder last year, and it didn't cancel Passover last year, and it certainly ain't going to cancel Passover this year. It might be different, it might be challenging because of the differences, but the meaning and the relevancy of this holiday remains just as important as it was 100 years ago, to 5 years ago, to 2,000 years, as it will be next year and the years after that. At 8 o'clock, please join ckj.org/VDS to have, together with Rabbi Steinmetz and Rabbi Laniado, all your questions about experiencing changing your home to a kosher home for Passover, and all the questions relating to Shabbat and Passover together at 8 o'clock. Next week, there are some upcoming programs as well. Would like everyone to participate where possible. So what are they? We have the Model Seder. Firstly, on Sunday night, we have the Shabbat Agdol Drasha, usually done in synagogue, this year done on Zoom. Monday night, 7:30, we have the Model Seder together with Rachel and some representative of the Kraus children. I don't know who, but they do, and they will be participating. And then on Tuesday night at 8:30, together with Rabbi Lookstein and Cantor Burson and Rabbi Steinmetz, Rabbi Laniado, we'll go through the Seder, but share some insights and share some ways that we find it meaningful and relevant, and try and share that with the community. Come to one, come to all. Please continue asking questions about Passover. Write them down, and see you in 4 minutes on the next Zoom. Any questions before we conclude?
Yeah, it says this class is on Tuesday next week. Is that what you meant by the 8:30 class? So is this class at 8:30 on Tuesday?
This class, when you say this class, the Model Seder is the 22nd, and next Tuesday at 8:30, there's another experience to go
Oh,
through.
Model Seder is 22nd. Okay,
Yeah.
the website said 23rd. Okay.
That could be a human error. Just to remind everybody that there are humans operating the website, in case anybody thought there were bots.
When are all the rabbis getting together to talk?
That should be Tuesday night. That should be the 23rd.
The 23rd, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
the rabbis talk every day, but
Oh, I know, but some days we listen. Take care.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
If you want the source sheet, I'm going to put it once more into the chat. Thank you for joining. Thank you for allowing me to enrich the Seder experience by going through the preparation. And see everybody in a few minutes.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.